Today, let's talk about Hawk the Slayer, a fantasy movie from the days of yore. Welcome back, those of you who've been here before. Welcome to those of you who are new to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about a fantasy movie from 1980 called Hawk the Slayer. I'm going to separate out the spoilers, even though this is a 43-year-old movie. I really shouldn't, but, I guess I will. This is literally like the outer edge of me really caring about spoilers. So, if it's from the 70s, don't expect me to do this. In fact, don't expect me to do this for most things from the 80s or 90s either. So, I watched this movie the other night on streaming. I'm recording this in early March 2023. For those of you in the future who are wondering, well, when was the other night? Well, that's when it was. So, yeah. So anyway, I watched it on, in case you see this like relatively shortly after I released this video. This was on Amazon Prime. It was free. You had to watch it through Freebie, which means it had a few commercials in it, but as someone who was alive in the 80s and knows what network television is like, commercials don't bother me. And there's far fewer in these than there are in normal television, so whatever. Anyway, so this movie, I recognize exactly one person in this movie, and that was the villain, who's played by Jack Palance, and his name is Voltan. Yes, I do have the thing up here for the names, because I remember the name of one character. That's the main character, Hawk the Slayer, who's never, I don't think is ever called Hawk the Slayer in the entire movie, and I don't really know why he has the title of the Slayer, because he doesn't kill that many people, and they're all evil. I don't know. Don't question it. I shouldn't. So, the basic plot of the movie, without going into spoilers, is Jack Palance and Hawk are brothers. I'm going to guess separated by considerable time, because Hawk looks to be quite a bit younger than Jack Palance. But maybe Jack Palance has always looked like a weathered old man and sounded like one. Don't know, hard to say. It does make him a good villain, which is why I think in almost everything I've ever seen him in, he's a villain. Not so much in, say, City Slickers, because there wasn't really a villain to be had there. But he was a little bit of an antagonist. But other than that, yeah, I mean, he's got the look and the sound. He's very much like Michael Wincott, who, for those of you who don't know him, or don't know his name, but might have probably seen him in a movie somewhere along the way. He was in The Crow as the main crime boss. His name is never used. It's Top Dollar. He's the one who fights Brandon Lee's character on top of the church at the end of the movie. Has a very notable, very unique sounding voice. Obviously much younger than Jack Palance. And, so he doesn't have the old weathered look going for him, but he does have the voice. Also, in a movie in a similar vein, but much higher budget and much better movie, he was in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves as the Sheriff of Nottingham. And he gets to find out that it's a mercy to not use a spoon. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, we'll go watch it and figure it out. I could explain it, but I'm not going to. So Jack Palance he's that kind of guy. He's got the notable voice, but like I said, he also has just the weathered look. So yeah, that's why he's almost always the villain, I believe. And yeah, then a whole bunch of people I didn't recognize. There's one like random soldier. Well, I say he's a random soldier from the battle, from a random battle that we don't see, I don't think, unless I tuned out in the first few minutes, which is possible. But for a random character that just kind of stumbles into the plot, he's in the rest of the movie. I don't know the actor's name, but I did recognize him. He's in the movie Needful Things. If you've seen that, he's the priest. A more recent example in the Star Trek reboot, the first one, he's the head of the Vulcan Science Council. So yeah, he's in a bunch of stuff. Other than that, I did look him up. I just don't remember his name. So I suppose I could look it up. Hang on. He is William Morgan Shepherd. Now, looking through the cast list, there are other people that I do recognize, or at least one anyway. And that's Patricia Quinn, who I just must not have put together that she was in the movie, because she plays the sorceress. I'm assuming they're referring to as the witch. And for those who don't know, Patricia Quinn is the woman who plays Magenta in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. But I definitely could not tell that in this movie. So there you go. There's a few other people that have been in some other things. But by and large, it's not a bunch of people you're going to recognize in all likelihood. So, yeah, so the plot is that you got the two brothers. What did I say his name was? Valak? Voltan. Voltan. Isn't he the leader of the Hawkmen from Flash Gordon? We'll have to check into that here in a minute. Well, anyway, so Voltan is evil and has decided to spread his evil across the land with his army of ne'er-do-wells who are just like over-the-top, cartoonishly evil. And like they're just committing evil acts every time you come across one of them. There's no like middle ground. It's like no, just spread destruction and hate all across the land. Go for it. It's just one of these things that can only happen in like fantasy stories. So you've got that going on, and Hawk has decided that he must put an end to this. He has personal reasons for going after his brother. You know, his brother, of course he does. And so he has to assemble his group of men to go fight him. And the group includes a giant, and by that I just mean a kind of tall guy who's really built, mostly. A dwarf, who's really just a short guy. An elf. Now, he actually is an elf. He's got the ears and everything. And, well, there's the witch that helps them. And she pops in and out a couple times. But, yeah, oh, and the rando soldier who lost a hand in the beginning of the movie, who has an automatic crossbow. So he can just, like, fire a bunch of arrows. Which comes in handy several times. So, yeah, that's the merry band of heroes that has to stop Voltan, his army of bad guys, and Voltan's son. So, Hawk's nephew. Yeah, so, you know, the movie, without going into spoilers, the effects are questionable. Basically everyone that dies, except for the guy that died by silly string, who I'll explain in a moment, dies by being stabbed or shot with an arrow or something of that nature, a fairly violent death. And I'm pretty sure we didn't see basically any blood in the entire movie. Like, people get stabbed and then people pull the swords out and there's nothing on them. So, that's obviously unrealistic. There's a whole lot of dagger stabbings. So a whole lot of people just get too close to people they really shouldn't, and oh, out comes the dagger, you're dead. And it's like a patented bad guy move a lot of times in this movie. And then you'll have, like, whenever the elf is firing arrows, it's a bunch of jump cuts to make it look like he's firing them in rapid succession, but it really just, it'll jump cut to him with the, loosing an arrow, guy getting hit, jump cut back to him with an arrow already nocked, firing again, guy getting hit, and just, it'll do that like 4 or 5 times in rapid succession to make you think he's loading and firing them that fast, when obviously he can't, so they're not showing him doing that. And same thing with the automatic crossbow. You'll see a guy get hit, it'll cut back to a bolt being loaded and fired, guy getting hit, and it's obviously a bunch of jump cuts. Like, it's not even smooth transitions or anything. So you got a bunch of that. The sword fights are, for some reason, Jack Palance always walks around carrying his sword, like, with the hilt down by his waist, but the blade, like, resting on his shoulder. Doesn't keep it in a scabbard, doesn't keep it ready to fight. He just has it, like, resting in this weird position throughout big chunks of the movie. It just looks awkward. Then you have Hawk. His sword is a magic sword that early on in the movie you see it hanging on a wall where the pommel is a closed fist, and then he does something with a magic gemstone and then focuses on the sword, and the sword opens up the fist, and the magic gemstone goes into the sword, and then the fist closes around it, and then it's like that throughout the rest of the movie. And it's supposedly like an elven mind stone, if I heard them correctly. And the only power this seems to grant the sword is whenever Hawk thinks about it in his hand, it comes to his hand. And unlike the weird jump cut business from earlier, it doesn't just appear in his hand. No, it actually has to, like, line up and slowly drift over and then actually get into his hand, and he has to grab it. It doesn't just, like, teleport with, like, a single obvious jump cut. So, yeah. I don't know. Then, then there's some of the magic. So, like I said, the one guy is literally silly stringed to death. Like, a bunch of the bad guys are holed up in a church for reasons, and most of them are asleep, and there's like one guard on duty, and the main door opens up, and a little kind of pipe looking thing sticks in, and I thought it was going to get like a blow dart or something. No, silly string starts firing out, and the guy's just like, and then just like gets covered in silly string. Just head to toe, green silly string. And it just keeps going until he's totally covered. And then whoever it was breaks in and does their thing, and like they're here in the foreground doing their stuff, and you can still see the guy just standing, well, I guess it'd be more like this. They're here in the foreground, the guy's just standing back here by the door, and I'm sure it's a mannequin or something at that point. But like, they don't even attempt to make the effect look better now that he's not being silly string, now that they can just do a static statue. They don't attempt to make it look any better. It's still just a dude covered in silly string. Yeah, that was pretty rough. What was even more rough, though, was when the witch is like, all right, I'm going to summon a whirlwind of fire and lightning to throw them off their guard so you can attack. And so you see this, like, really crappy kind of superimposed 1980s, I don't even know if this is CGI at this point. It's probably like hand-drawn on a different cell and overlaid onto the film cell. I think that's how they did it at that point in time. So you've got this like weird energy tornado effect heading towards the door. Now, I can forgive that, okay, because other movies from the 80s, they did similar things, okay, and other movies didn't have the budget that Star Wars had, which wasn't a huge budget, but, it had money behind it. So I can forgive things looking a little sketchy with that kind of stuff, okay, emerging technologies and whatnot, okay, whatever. Then there's the interior shot once the door busts open. A bunch of fog rolls in, and then the fire and lightning is represented by a whole bunch of glowing bouncy balls about this big, just firing through the door and bouncing around everywhere, and just several rounds of them. and all the villains just fleeing as if like the wrath of God was descending upon them. And it's just like, what the hell is this? You know, like, they were obviously bouncy balls too. Like, there wasn't even an attempt to hide it, because it'd go in, it'd bounce, and then just roll across the floor. You know, it was that was pretty damn absurd. So yeah, then yeah, so that's the level of. Oh, and also, I think there was one real building exterior used for a large structure. Every other time, the characters are kind of a little bit in the distance because it's a painting. You know, there's no real building there. All the buildings, that's how they look fantastic, as in fantastical, not as in awesome. I mean, the paintings are well done. You know, I'm not trying to crap on the artist or anything. They are well done paintings. They just don't look 100% real. You know, they're not as seamless as some of the matte paintings, again, like in Star Wars. So they are good artwork, though. You know, I think they're great fantasy set pieces, but they just don't have, you know, they don't have those little things that make them look real, or it's because of the angle they're shot and the lighting or something. But I mean, you know, before CGI, and if you're not going to build a miniature, it's kind of your go-to choice. They don't look terrible, okay? I'm not saying that they look just god-awful or anything, but it's noticeable that it's not real. So you got that, and yeah. So I think that's about as far as I can go before I get into spoiler territory, which is where we find ourselves now. So the plot is that Voltan kills he and Hawk's dad, and his dad refuses to give him the magic sword, so he leaves right as Hawk is showing up. He tells Hawk how to get the sword down and how to attach the magic stone and everything, and then he dies. I don't know the actor's name that played their dad, but at the time I was watching, I thought, hey, this guy does look kind of familiar, and then I looked it up. If you watch Conan the Destroyer, he is the guy whenever they go into the cave after they have defeated Tothamon the wizard. I think it's Tothamon, to get the gemstone, and then they have to take the gemstone into the second dungeon to get the horn, and then they come back out with the horn, and there's a big army of dudes there ready to fight them, and he's the leader. He's a wizard. I don't remember what his name was. He might have been Tothamon. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, he's that guy. So I think, I don't know which of the two bit parts he had more lines in, but you know, that's him. So Hawk takes the magic sword, goes out. A couple of the bad guys are going to burn this witch, and I don't know if they were going to burn her because she was a witch and because they're like hardcore religious types. I highly doubt that, at least the second part. Or if they were going to burn her just because that seemed to be the cruel way to go about killing her. I highly suspect it's that part. So Hawk saves her. She helps Hawk a little bit, and then later on he goes back to her whenever he's like, all right, I've got to assemble the Avengers here, you need to help me. And so she like teleports him out to grab each of the people, you know, the giant, the dwarf, the elf, and I really feel like I'm forgetting someone in this equation, but I'm not going to think too hard on it. They clearly didn't make much of an impression if there's someone else I'm forgetting. And this is because Jack Palance's character went to the church where the soldier in the beginning of the movie stumbles in injured. They have to cut off his hand, and he goes to find Hawk to bring him to fight. And then Jack Palance shows up and kidnaps the abbess, because I guess it's an abbot. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with church terminology, unfortunately, to know if that's the correct term here for the woman who leads this particular group. I think they're nuns. Obviously, they're medieval nuns. They're not wearing what we picture as typical nun outfit today because it wasn't the same. And I don't remember if they were referred to as nuns. So, and it was a question of, is this Christianity or not? I believe it is, because Hawk is wearing a cross. So, I believe it is. And you see a gentleman later who IMDb lists someone as an abbot. I'm pretty sure this is the guy I'm thinking of, who looks like looks like kind of like a cardinal, I would imagine, if I'm remembering the rank from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves correctly. The guy who was there in the castle, who Robin tries to appeal to, and he's like, oh, well, me and John, we're kind of tight. Your dad supposedly was a devil worshiper, so I can't help you, son. By the way, don't touch any of my gold. I'm greedy, obviously. That guy, he's dressed similar to that. So I think that guy was a cardinal, but it's been a while since I've seen that movie. So I'm assuming that these are Christians of some stripe or another. But again, I don't think the movie actually says that. It probably just assumed that you would assume that, because this is obviously like pseudo-medieval Europe, but we're also in Fantasyland because there's magic. I don't know. So, he kidnaps her and is like, oh, if you don't pay the ransom by such and such, she's dead. And so the other sister's like, well, let's get the money together and pay him. And Hawk's like, no, you don't understand. If we pay him, she's going to be dead anyway. We need to go rescue her. But just in case, they get the gold. And they go get that by hassling some slaver and taking his money and killing him, freeing the slaves. And so they get the gold, and I think Jack Palance comes and takes the gold, and it gets a little muddled there towards the end. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of capturing and escaping and whatnot, and ultimately it ends in a fight between Hawk and Voltan, where Hawk ends up killing him. Now, along the way, I mentioned there's the witch. Well, there's also a wizard helping Voltan. Voltan, part of his face is covered through most of the movie because, as you see in a flashback, like 3/4 the way through the movie, he was going to kill Hawk at one point. He's got him tied to a tree. And there's a woman there, and she's like, no, Hawk's the one I really love. And he's like, yeah, well, too bad. I'm going to kill him. And so she is like, yeah, well, burning torch to the face, jackass. And roasts half his face. So then he's down. She cuts Hawk down from the tree. The two of them jump in the boat. She's rowing out. And Voltan, I think, used a bow and arrow. Hell, it might have been a dagger. He uses a dagger for everything else. But anyway, stabs her in the back from a distance, while she's in the boat with some kind of projectile object. So she dies in Hawk's arms. So that's a main driver for why Hawk is out to kill this guy, because he killed the woman she loves. Now, Jack Palance is like, oh, you took the woman I love from me. So I don't know who's actually truthful in this equation, because I suppose he could have loved her, she could have loved Hawk, and Hawk could have loved her, and she might not necessarily have loved Voltan. All these facts could be true. So I don't know. Anyway, so that's part of his reasoning. So he kills Jack Palance's character. They save the abbess. Oh, one of the nuns betrayed them at one point. Poisons their food. Not poisons. No, I suppose it is a poison technically, but he's knockout drugs. And so then Jack Palance and his guys all roll into the church, and he's like, oh, thanks for your help. And she's like, well, you need to release the abbess, and you swore you wouldn't kill him. He's like, yeah, well, dagger, you're dead. So, that's what Hawk tried to warn her about. She didn't listen. No helping that. So, the entirety of the group does not make it. At the end, the wizard comes and collects Voltan's body and is going to resurrect him. Because obviously this movie sets up for a sequel that never happened and was never going to happen. I don't know why they bothered, but they did. So, you know, maybe one of you out there can write the sequel to Hawk the Slayer, and we can see it on the big screen. Well, a screen anyway. So yeah, it's not a terrible movie. Okay, you can see like there's definitely a lot of standard fantasy tropes in play. Uh, there are bad elements in the movie. There are definitely like some so horrible this is somewhat entertaining moments. I think it's worth watching. Just don't go in expecting Shakespeare here, because it's not even close. But you know, you do have your adventuring party. You know, your leader, who I'm assuming is a fighter, your giant, who's probably also a fighter, your dwarf, who I think is also a fighter, and your elf, who is probably also a fighter. And the witch, she's your magic user, against a bunch of other fighters trying to rescue a priestess, and they've got a wizard on their side. Yeah, so I mean, there's, you know, you could easily adapt the plot to this to a D&D game. I don't know about a campaign, but definitely a game. So, like I was saying, there's definitely, you know, you could adapt it to a campaign if you wanted to, at least parts of this plot. But you're definitely going to jazz it up a bit. But other than that, yeah, it's silly, it's goofy, but it's worth watching. Okay, if you want to see some of the things that it was probably inspired by, some of the things that also inspired Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think it was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's too early in the timeline for that, but it was definitely inspired by some of the same things. Just a different result. For instance, there are neither dungeons nor dragons in this movie. But yeah, you know, if you're bored, it's worth a watch. But otherwise, folks, that's about it for me here. So let me know if you've ever seen this movie, what you think about it. Have I inspired you to watch this movie? And if you do, based on my recommendation, let me know what you think. Are you ever going to listen to my recommendations ever again? Somewhere down here, we should have something about our Twitter account. Definitely comment there too if you join up. But otherwise, you know, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you haven't yet, if you want to, we always appreciate it. But otherwise, folks, catch you on the flip side.